and welcome to episode 60 of Book Writing Tips, quick tips for new and seasoned authors, and I am your host, Alba Arango. In today's episode, I want to go over things that I personally look through when I am writing my second draft, as well as my third draft and my fourth draft, and then my final draft, because every author does things differently. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of insight into how I do this, the process that I go through, and I'm actually currently going through because I'm actually in this sort of second draft stage of my newest book. And for those of you that are still writing your first draft, trust me, by the time we are done with this episode, you are going to feel so much better about your first draft because you are going to see how Alba screws up her first draft so badly that I need to fix it in my second draft, third draft, fourth draft, fifth draft, etc., etc. So hopefully you'll feel a lot better and a little less stressed about your first draft when I talk about what I do for my second draft on through my final drafts. Let's get to it. Alrighty then. Today's episode will be in two parts, as always. In part one, I want to talk about the things that I do when I go through and do my second draft. And this is kind of like a big chunk. So I'm going to talk about that. It's actually where I am right now in my current project. I want to do the different things I am looking through or looking for when I am doing my second draft. And then in part two, I want to talk about, okay, now that, my second draft is done, let's talk about the nitty gritty and what I do with the third draft and then the fourth draft. And then I want to talk about what I do, the very, very, very last thing, what I do with my final draft before I send it off to my beta readers. So here we go. Let's start with part one and this incredible second draft. Okay. First of all, you should know that when I finish my first draft, it's ugly, it's messy. When I finish my first draft, I actually take a break from the project. And usually it's a few weeks or sometimes a month, depending on how much time I have to, do this. If you're on a deadline, that may not be possible. But for me, I'm not on a deadline. So I like to take a break from it. Now, this current project, I actually took almost a 6-month break, which is a little long. I think the longest I've ever done. But a lot of stuff is going on. Life happens. And so now here I am, and it's 6 months later, and now I'm working on my second draft. So the second draft for me is all about the big picture. And I really do mean the big picture. Since I've taken a break from my project, the first thing I do is I just take a break and I read the entire thing all the way through without making any changes. I might make a change, like a little change, like a spelling error or something minor that I notice, but I don't do any revisions at all. I read through the whole thing all the way through to get myself back in the swing of the mood, what the story is about, and the tone and what I want the story to be. So now that I've got that in my head, now let's get down to revisions. So what I look for in this second draft, are there any plot holes? So as I'm reading through it, I'm kind of making a mental note of everything that is happening in the book. Are there any plot holes? Are there some things that loose threads that I never really cleared up? Things that are confusing? Are there things that are missing that should be there? Are there too many things and that I need to fill in gaps? I'm looking for the big picture. So I'm not worried about, word usage or sentences, or I'm not worried about any of that right now. I'm worried about the story. I'm worried about the plot. I'm worried about the flow. I'm worried about all of those things. I take a look at all my characters because I am a pantser and I write by the seat of my pants. So sometimes at the beginning of the story, I throw these characters in there that I think are going to be a big part of the story. And in the end, I don't end up using them at all. Well, now that I'm going back through, it's time to get rid of those characters. They are unnecessary and they don't need to be there. And just FYI, looking back, the very first book I wrote, which is The Magic Sapphire, in looking back, I had these two kid characters in there that are like, these obnoxious, like super rich kids in town. And yeah, they were fine and they worked fine in the book, but looking back, I wish I had taken them out they really don't serve the purpose that I think I thought I was going to use them for, which is I thought they were going to be recurring characters later on in different books, and I have never, ever used them again. And looking back, I'm like, they really weren't necessary. I wish I had gotten them out, but I didn't. So they're in there. So if you read The Magic Sapphire, you'll know exactly what kids I'm talking about. But this is the time when you need to look at, and you'll have your characters change. When you started the book, were they a certain way? So for example, in one of the books I wrote, the antagonist, I started off, he was British. And then halfway through the book, I changed my mind, decided to make him French. And so I changed him to being French. And so the character was very, very different at the beginning than he was in the middle and for the rest of the book. So I had to make those changes in my second draft so that, my character was the same throughout the entire book. And you know what? It's okay. It's okay in your first draft to do things like that. It's okay to have a character at the beginning of the book that's a snob or that's obnoxious. And then you decide that, you know what? I would really like them better this way, but I don't want to go back and change it, because the purpose of your first draft is to get that book done. The second draft is where you fix all these things, which is what I'm doing now, fixing all those things. And that's exactly what the purpose is of the second draft, is for you to fix the mistakes you made when you were writing your first draft. So if you're writing your first draft, don't sweat it. Don't stress out. Your goal is to just get that story down on paper. Just get it done. Then you get to go back and fix all the mistakes and the ugly mistakes you've made, like, changing a character from British to French. There you go. All right. Also, this is the time to look at every scene. Are these scenes necessary? Again, if you write by the seat of your pants like I do, sometimes I look and I'm like, oh my gosh, this scene is totally, really unnecessary. Like, it doesn't need to be in there at all. However, sometimes within that scene that is unnecessary and you're probably going to get rid of that scene, there might be an element of that scene that you really, really like. Like there might be this banter between, two of the characters that you really like, this conversation that they had, but the scene is unnecessary. So what I do in a situation like that, which I have done multiple times, is that I take that, scene out, but I, copy and paste that like banter and try to figure out where else I can put it. And this is where storyboarding is wonderful. And if you have Scrivener, it's so, so easy to do, because you have the whole, each chapter has a different, so you have each scene that has its own title. And now I can look at it and go, okay, where would that banter fit in really good? Oh, this scene over here, it'd probably fit in really good there. And then I can just go right into that scene and kind of plug it in there. And this is one of the reasons why I love Scrivener, why it works really, really well for me. And of course, I'm sure Pro Writing Aid does the same thing, but I do love Scrivener. And just on a total FYI, I am an affiliate for Scrivener. So I actually do have, if you're like, on the fence about whether or not to have it, and this is one of those things you're like, oh, that would be really beneficial, maybe I will get Scrivener, because it is like a $60 upfront cost. FYI, if you do decide to get Scrivener, I would really, really, really appreciate if you use the link in my description, because it has my affiliate code in there, and I would actually get a little commission. It's not anything major. I'm not going to get rich from it, but hey, I might be able to afford a cup of coffee. So there you go, or a gallon of gas, which I think is actually more than a cup of coffee now here in Nevada. Anyways, that's a totally unrelated side note. But this is where looking at every scene and deciding if that scene is really necessary is a good time. This is the second draft. Now you can really make those scenes either appear or disappear as they need to. Now, if you have subplots, so if you have like a romantic subplot, this is also the time when you go through and you look to see if you have enough elements of your subplot throughout the book, because sometimes you have this great subplot and at the end there's like, it's there, and there's like none of it at the beginning, or you somehow kind of drifted away from it in the middle and then boop, it pops back up at the end. And this is where you want to kind of make sure you have elements of your subplot like weaving throughout the story. And this second draft is where you kind of want to take care of that. And also, if you're writing mystery, this is a great time to kind of see where you can throw in those red herrings. Where can you add some things that are going to take the reader and make them think that, oh, maybe this is where the reader's going to start to think that, this character might have something to do with it. And this is where you can throw those red herrings in, which is a great idea. And one last thing, think of your character arc. And if you're doing the hero's journey, think of the hero's journey. Have you taken your character through all the steps of the hero's journey? Has your character arc developed the way you wanted it to, or is it really lacking in some places where you're not really developing the character? You're not seeing character growth. Your character, you're not seeing what you want to get across to your reader throughout the book. So really, in a nutshell, the big picture, is your story where you want it to be when you are done with your second draft? Is your character the way you want them when you're done with your second draft? Is every scene that you've written necessary and fulfilled and out the way you want it in the second draft? So the second draft is big picture. When you are done with your second draft, your story is the way you want it to be. And then we can get to part 2 and the the little nitpicking. I'm going to do a lot of it. So before I get to part 2, let's do the crazy law / writing prompt. Now, if you are new to the podcast, every week I give you a crazy law. And this is a law that once upon a time in history was a real law. And your challenge, should you choose to accept it, is to write a short story based on that law. And this is just kind of a way to flex your writing muscles, maybe give you a break from your work in progress, and just kind of, I don't know, it can be kind of fun. So here we go. Here is this week's crazy law. In Bristow, Oklahoma, an ordinance requires every public eating house to serve each customer 1 peanut in the shell with each glass of water. Now, why they thought they had to actually make that a law, I have no idea, but it's a fun way to use those writing muscles. So there you go. Now, let's move on to part 2. So your second draft is done. You have your story the way you want it. No more plot holes. Your characters are the way you want them. The scenes are where they need to be. You got those red herrings in there. The story arc is complete. Everything is good. Now it's time to move on to what I call the third draft. Now, in my third draft, I consider this the enhancement phase. Now that I've got all the scenes that I want, I've got all the characters that I want, now it's time to enhance the scenes. So you've got the scene. Now let's go through and see, is there anywhere in each scene where you could add something to do with the senses? They walk into a diner, maybe you can throw in what it smells like. Or if they're walking through the streets of New York, maybe you can throw in just a real quick snippet about the smell from the sewer. Or really just anything, they're eating, just a quick, what does this taste like? And you're not going to do that for every single time they're eating. You're not going to do that every single time they're walking the streets of New York. But every once in a while, to enhance the scenes, to get your reader more into the setting, throw some stuff in there once in a while. What about the weather? You have an outdoor scene. Once in a while, throw in something about the weather, the wind, the chill, the heat, something about it just to add that little extra and enhance your scenes. And that's what I like to do with my third draft. Are they doing, are there footsteps? Are they walking upstairs? They're trying to sneak. Can the footsteps be heard? Just all those little extra things that you can add to make the setting more clear, to make it a little more enhanced. And that is what this is all about. Now, by the time I get to the fourth draft, really the story, the enhancement, all of that is done. Really, the story is done. Now, one last thing, wording. This is where I break down the wording. Am I overusing words? I start with looking at all my paragraph openers. If I'm writing in first person, which the current book I'm in is not, but I have written, 6 books in first person. If I'm writing in first person, oh my gosh, how many times am I using the word I? Am I overusing the word I? Because it does get redundant. So am I overusing it? How am I opening each of my paragraphs? Am I literally just doing, subject, noun, subject, noun, subject, noun, subject, noun, subject, noun, subject, noun, subject, noun? And that's exactly how monotonous it is when you're reading if it's only subject, noun. Hey, I know, start off one of your paragraphs with, a prepositional phrase once in a while or some dialogue once in a while. You got to kind of shake things up a little. All right. Obviously, you're not going to do that every single time. And I don't mean every single paragraph has to start a different way. That would also be like maybe even a little like, whoa, throwing the reader for a loop. But definitely overusing the same paragraph opening over and over and over again can get redundant. Dialogue. Are your characters sounding unique? I remember one time when I was a young author, well, and I don't mean young, most of you already know I didn't even start my serious writing journey till I was in my late 30s. So I don't mean when I was a young author, younger, that's a better word. Or when I was a newbie author. How's that? I went to a writer's conference and I remember hearing one of the authors that was speaking saying, every single word. You need to look at every single word. Is every single word you're using necessary? And for me, that's almost like a little much, but I do know what they mean. Are they necessary? Are you throwing in words that don't need to be there? Just simple things like the word that. And I've done I don't remember if I did a podcast, might have been a TikTok where I talked about, look through your that's, do a search for all the that's. Are they necessary? Because they oftentimes are not. Your characters, do they sound unique? I remember, again, one of my early books, I remember in my writers group, them saying, I had a couple of them say, your kids all sound the same. And I had to go through and make sure that the characters all sound unique because I have 3 12-year-old kids. If they're all talking the same, it's hard to tell, who's talking. Do I have to have a character tag? Which brings me to character tags. Do I need all the character tags or can I replace some of those character tags with action? Don't forget that you want your characters to sound unique, so you may not need character tags for every single bit of dialogue. You should be able to tell, and hopefully you can tell, which of the characters is speaking by what they're saying. Now, I'm not saying don't use character tags at all. Some authors do that. They don't use character tags at all. I'm just saying they may not all be necessary. And don't forget about throwing some action in there too. Then, once I've kind of gone through, okay, I've got the paragraphs looking good, my word choices are looking good, I do one last thing, and that is I do a search for words that I personally tend to overuse. So things like the word was, and it's always so disheartening when I do that and I do a search for the word was and it comes back we found 1,942 was. I'm like, oh my gosh, my document's only 130 pages. That means I use at least 15 of them on every single page. But I do a search for them because not oftentimes, obviously some of the was's are going to stay there, but sometimes I can replace the was with a stronger verb. And I do like to do that because stronger verbs definitely enhance the sentence. So I do like to use stronger verbs whenever I can. And I do try to make sure I'm not using passive voice over and over again because, publishers and readers and agents do not like passive voice. They prefer, do not prefer passive voice. They prefer active voice. And the word look. Oh my gosh. It's ridiculous how many times I use the word look. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 times in one paragraph because, they're detectives. They're looking at stuff. So they're looking at this, looking at this, looking at this. Steve looked at this. Jenny looked at this. Matt looked at this. I'm like, oh my gosh, do they all have to look at this? So I do a search for words that I personally overuse, like the word look and the word stare. Apparently my characters stare at a lot of things. So that's what I do. I do searches for words that I tend to overuse, and each author is different in words that they overuse. So just as you're reading through, are there words that you tend to overuse? And then you can kind of look to make sure you don't do it. Okay. So now once I'm done with that, I feel like I'm done. I have one last thing that I do, my final draft before I send it off to my beta readers. And that is this. I read it out loud to myself. I print out one chapter at a time. I get my red pen, purple pen, green pen, whatever pen I happen to grab out the drawer that day. And I walk around the house and I read it out loud to myself. Because when you hear it out loud, you can stumble on things. You can see how things don't flow and then you can fix it. And yes, some people do that a little bit earlier on, like in the 3rd draft or 4th draft. I save it for last and I try to change things at the end. And then once I'm done with this, I read it out loud again, every chapter. And if it sounds good, it's ready for my beta readers. So there you go. That is what I personally do. Every author is different. You are going to find your own, shtick and how you do it. And I just hope that maybe this gives you some ideas of things to look for in your 2nd draft, in your 3rd draft, 4th draft, final draft. And again, don't forget, if you're still in the 1st draft, these are all things you do not need to worry about. But see what I mean by your 1st draft? My 1st drafts are always a mess. I always mess things up in the 1st draft. The point of the 1st draft is to just get the story down on paper. Then you fix it. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this episode, if you like my podcast, please, please, please give me a like, give me a rating, and don't forget to subscribe. And I drop a new episode every Wednesday. So until next week, stay safe, and I will see you all next week.